Well, here we are once again with episode 7 of That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcaster. I'm your host, Isekai Sensei Sama, aka Brad, and as always, I'm joined in the Weeb Cabal by Kermit D. Grog, aka Andrew.
Howdy, howdy, I'm back from my globetrotting, ready to talk about some animes and mangas.
And Bento Baggins, aka Ben.
Konbanwa.
Every single time. Okay. If you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. And if you're new here, we're friends who have been watching anime and having discussions for a long time and decided to share those conversations through a podcast. Before we dive in, Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, Volume 4 came out recently.
Yes,
Recommend you pick that up. And don't forget to hit us up on social media so that we know what you think about Frieren and the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. So, Andrew, did you happen to listen to the episode that Ben and I did without you?
I did. I got to hear the bonus episode where you talked all about isekais. It was like you guys had your own little spinoff.
Yeah, it was indeed. I'm thinking that, maybe Ben and I are going to strike out on our own, or a little, maybe call it a sequel to this podcast or a spinoff.
A prequel podcast? Has anybody tried that yet?
Have a podcast for when we were young boys.
We technically do have prequel podcasts now that I think about it. The podcast that happened before this one.
That's true.
That is technically a prequel.
Yeah.
And could show up on this very channel. Who knows?
What's interesting, though, is there's been a lot of sequels and spin-offs of anime and manga recently. So, do you guys have any particular spin-offs or sequels to anime that you, really got into?
I know I personally read, which I believe was one of the inspirations for this, was reading through My Hero Academia Vigilante, which I thought was... I've really enjoyed it so far. It's not done yet, and I haven't caught up for a while, but I feel like it captures how big My Hero was in a way that we don't usually see in manga and anime, that we see in the West literally all the time. Because in the West, everything's getting a sequel or spin-off, so they're just trying to get more and more from a singular narrative place. But in Japan, it feels more rare, at least for what we get. So it was kind of interesting that we got it, because it's not the same author. I believe it's somebody else. And I don't think I've really run into that before, where they're running mostly concurrently. I don't actually really know when Vigilante started in relation to the original manga, but...
Now, do you think... you mentioned... the Western part of that. Do you think that there's some kind of influence going on?
Maybe. We see that. My Hero Academia in itself is a very Western influence thing of all the different eras of Western comic books. But it's interesting that this is the first major one that I can think of. Because we've definitely seen sequel things. Because we've Boruto to Naruto. But that's the same author, isn't it? It's a continuation.
It's not the same artist.
Oh, okay.
It's I believe one of his assistants took it over.
That would make sense.
His name is still on it, and I was going to say, I read Dragon Ball Super, where Toriyama's name is still on it, but it's kind of questionable how much he's actually contributing.
So I guess we would call that one a sequel series then. Dragon Ball Super is a sequel series.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinct difference between a sequel and a spin-off, although I'm not exactly sure what that line is.
Well, Super is just a continuation. It's the same characters, just taking place later in their lives.
Right. So what does constitute a spin-off? I think there's an easy line in that, it's something that takes place in the same universe, but it follows different characters.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say Vigilantes is a spin-off prequel following different characters, but there are some characters from the main series who do play a fairly major part. But they're not the main... none of them are the main character.
Can you call that a prequel? Because...
Can I call it a prequel or a spin-off? Because I can't call it a prequel because it's taking place well before the events of My Hero Academia proper.
I think we can establish completely that it is a spin-off as it follows different characters.
Correct.
And it certainly takes place beforehand. But does prequel need to follow the same connotation as sequel in that, like,
Oh, because it is following different characters. Is this a prequel?
right.
Well, what? Because it's a prequel to certain characters. There are certain characters that now, because I've read Vigilantes, I have more of a context for that I didn't have just admittedly watching the My Hero Academia anime.
Do you use sequel and prequel strictly to describe a time frame, and then whether or not it's a spin-off is like an add-on?
I guess even more so than the characters, a prequel or sequel is about the universe, I would say. So, like, even if Naruto wasn't in Boruto, because he's not the main character, it is a sequel because it is something that takes place in the Naruto universe continuum after the events of the last one.
So strictly time-based.
I think a spin-off is more independent. Like, if I'm going to date myself a lot here.
Go for it.
But the only really good examples I can think of are like sitcoms. Like how
Joey.
Joey, yeah, Joey and Friends. I was going to go earlier than that. I was going to say like All in the Family and the Jeffersons.
Yeah, they did start that a while back.
Yeah, where you don't necessarily even need to know that the Jeffersons ever was a spinoff of All in the Family, or you don't need to know that Frasier was a spinoff of Cheers.
I'll tell you what, that one blew my mind because when I was young, Cheers was over. Frasier was running. My parents would watch Frasier, and then when I found out, like, I saw Cheers and he was on there and they called him and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, you traveled back in time and you're like, yeah, exactly. That's got to be weird.
Yeah.
Imagine reading My Hero Academia Vigilantes not knowing somehow. I have no idea how you would do that. But
That's
that
got to
would probably
happen,
be-
though, to people, right?
Does it?
It has to, because especially if you're someone like an actual Japanese person who's buying manga at a store. You go into a store, you physically pick up a copy of something. You see this on the shelf. You see Vigilante sitting there. You pick it up. You're like, oh, superheroes. This looks
But
interesting.
would
I'll
that be
read
right
this.
next to like My Hero Academia? That's
I mean,
it's like
maybe.
I've seen. The Star Wars is always such an easy thing to go to. It's like, oh, I've seen like Star Wars, like one of their spin-offs, but I've never seen any of the mainline movies. It's like, and I
Right,
guess there's
so,
a little
like,
bit more choice in that. But here,
If
it's
someone was to read a book about some kind of blue alien guy with like red eyes who's really smart in the Star Wars universe and they'd never seen the Star Wars movies, they'd be super confused.
I'm really confused who you're talking about.
Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Sure, okay.
But I don't think there's ever.
That's a subtle plug.
I don't think there's been an anime spin-off yet, or a manga spin-off that has exceeded the popularity of the original.
Okay, well,
Oh man,
I could be wrong.
You've stepped on a landmine.
All right.
this is
Brad's
this
got
is something
prep.
I was looking over the notes that we had for this episode, and one particular item which we've brought up a little bit is the influence from the West on how this works as far as brand building and things like that. And I did a little bit of research, and as I was looking through, like, what have we had with sequels to anime and manga, and you think back, you're like, oh, Dragon Ball ran for a while, and then we went to Dragon Ball Z,
But
and
we
that was
didn't.
really popular.
That was only in the West.
But there's one series that is the granddaddy. There's one anime manga series that's the granddaddy of sequels and spin-offs that everyone is missing.
Okay.
And as soon as I say it, you're going to be like, oh,
Does it start with the letter P?
it does not.
Oh, okay.
Gundam.
Yeah.
So-
Gundam's interesting. That's like
That's a good point.
Gundam is very interesting.
I guess I can say as a Westerner coming to Gundam, I think we all came to Gundam Wing first because of Toonami, and in Japan they are very confused as to why Gundam Wing is so popular over here.
You're going to have to help me with this one because Gundam is a major blind spot of mine. I don't think I've ever knowingly seen any of it. I've just sort of osmosis things via the internet. But Brad makes a good point about how there's like, I do know that there's a million different Gundam shows and other things.
So here's the thing. I started looking through this because as soon as I saw Gundam listed as something with spin-offs and sequels, it just came flooding back to me. Like, I grew up, I watched G Gundam.
Oh, that's the worst one.
I love G Gundam, okay? I had no idea there was other Gundams.
Oh, what a unfortunate place to start.
But the thing is, I looked through this. There was something like 32 different spin-offs for Gundam.
But are they all like different universes? Like this is where my
Yes.
ignorance is going to come in. Where it's
So,
like you
some
have
of
the
it
name
is-
and it just sort of promises
Yeah.
you the concept of they're giant robots fighting in space? Question mark. I don't actually know if that's a
Honestly, I
concept
feel
for the
like
show.
this is sort of Gundam is sort of like the Warhammer of anime and manga, in that like there's just so many different versions of it. Some of them are sequels that take place in the same universe, same characters, stuff like that. But then some of them are just like completely on their own. G Gundam is like its own thing.
Yeah, G Gundam's weird. I'd think of it as like Final Fantasy. You know how there's every Final Fantasy has similar elements. Like they always have the same like fire, Fira,
Yeah.
Firaga, whatever.
Sid's in there somewhere.
Yeah, and there's so Gundam. In order for it to be a Gundam, there usually have to be space colonies and the Earth, and there usually has to be some tension there, and there have to be mobile suits, which are the big humanoid robots, and then there have to be these superior humanoid robots called Gundams that are like game-changing super weapons. And it usually follows the pilots of the Gundams and their complex moral choices about the war and trying to figure out which side is right.
So the thing is they started doing sequels and spin-offs to Gundams in the mid 80s.
Okay, I'm going to present an idea using the thing that I thought you were going to say, which was Pokemon.
Well,
And the thing that
that's more recent though.
But the thing that both of those have in common is that there's a major pillar of those franchises that have nothing to do with anime. The major pillar of Gundam is literally the Gundam builders. Like, it's called Gunpla. It's like part of the name. Like, that is a thing that is inescapable within kind of pop culture to an extent.
Was that before the anime and manga?
I don't know, but it's not that it's before it, but like that is a major pillar of which it exists.
True, yeah.
That is like known that like there are people who have never seen Gundam probably who build those. Like it's a whole thing onto itself.
Maybe.
And Pokemon is the same thing with its video games. It's like it's an anime, but it's one of its main pillars is a video game. It is
Yeah.
a multi media franchise. That was fun. I found that as I was going.
I feel like Pokemon is more well known that it's a show and a video game. And
But it has a whole bunch of different spin-offs. They've had multiple outside of the main anime line. There's been a number of different like little mini series and other things. There's the manga for it. There's various movies, including Detective Pikachu, which is like a really funky spin-off.
I mean, let's
like,
not forget the trading cards.
yeah, like again, it's a giant media thing.
Yeah.
Where I think what we were trying to get at with the beginning with kind of Vigilantes as our starting point is like that's kind of like here's this one and here's this one. There's not like obviously My Hero Academia is moving merch, but it's not like it has another arm that is like this is a key pillar of what this thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you have something that it's more of just the idea than just here is the anime, it's here is the brand. When you get capital B brand, I feel like that's when you run into those more often.
Yeah.
Now that you've presented it. So I guess my question through all this is still like what is stopping this from happening more in manga and anime? Is it something we want? I mean, like, I'm having a really good time with Vigilantes. I think it's really neat. I think it fleshes out a world that's got a lot of space to be explored.
I guess that's sort of my position is I don't think that it's not that prevalent in anime and manga. Through just some of the stuff we have listed here, some of the things that I looked at, there's lots of them. It might not be quite as prevalent as the Western world, especially if you think about things like the Marvels, the DC, especially the Marvel movies now, and with the TV shows, like that's just like a huge. They've connected absolutely everything about it.
Yeah, but that was a thing of Western comics before.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, what we're probably talking about is the way manga is created as one writer, one artist,
Yep.
a team of assistants. Shonen Jump, I guess, probably owns those titles, but I think in Japan, it's a totally different system of publishing where you would have a mangaka pitch a series to an editor and have to get picked up.
It's one, yeah, like you said, it's one person. Nobody else
Whereas
can play an Otis Poole right now, the guy who writes One Piece, because it's not done. You can't explore the spaces, even if it's a cool world to explore, because there is story that hasn't happened yet. You can't explore it.
Well, and I think the legal relationship is different too.
Oh,
like
okay.
I think Oda actually owns One Piece and Luffy and his characters in a way that, obviously everybody other than Stan Lee did not own theirs. Like Jack Kirby, had to die before he got his name put on any of the Marvel stuff. And so only the best writers and artists can walk into Marvel or DC and pitch them a series. For the most part, they come up with their plans with their own team, and then they hire out artists and writers to execute them.
They're
Well, yeah, I
pieces
mean
in a machine.
the directors. There's different directors for like every single movie, because what they're doing is they're going, here's the movie that we want. Who's a famous director who's got some kind of vision for this?
And then Kevin Feige comes in and his team and goes, okay, here's how you fit the MCU.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I think it's coming the other direction. Feige's first is going, or people might come and pitch it, but they're then going out and seeking a director. The last the Doctor Strange movie that just came out, Sam Raimi, they brought him back. Like he hadn't done any of that stuff for a while. They brought him back and like, here, do this movie.
It's Raimi as heck. I love it. So I guess that's why we don't normally see it, and I wish I would have been able to do more research into why. I keep coming back to Vigilantes because it's the one that stands out the strongest, because in American comics it's like you get spin-offs all the time of like, here's this character in this thing, here's a side series of this is what they were doing when they weren't on quote-unquote screen at the time.
I think it is they do tend to be easy to miss because I was looking through stuff and
give me some examples.
It just came up and I was like, oh, this is, I mean, the Gundam was the big one. But another one that I actually know of that I hadn't thought of until I started looking into this, you guys, I believe you guys have heard of this. Is it wrong to try and pick up girls in a dungeon? Do you remember that one?
I've never read it, but
I've heard you. Yeah. I've heard you and other people talk about it.
There's a spin-off which takes place at the same time.
So a midquel. And
I'm wondering if that is purely a spin-off then, because it's not a sequel or a prequel. But that spin-off follows the main love interest, and I haven't watched the entirety of the last season, so don't come at me if she's not the main love interest anymore. I guess she wasn't. Well, I'm not going to go into that, but
smart choice.
They animated the whole spin-off series, so you had like the first season. And then this spinoff came out. And actually, technically, the main character in that one was the companion of the girl. So, but she's following her. So, anyway.
Had the main series finished, or was that
no?
So the main series is running while this spinoff is also running.
Yep.
What is the source material of How to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Is it a light novel?
That's a good question, and I should have looked into that.
I feel like this episode's been a lot of, if we did more research, and because usually we just do off the dome and we know things.
Well, the reason I ask is because what you're getting at with Gundam and Pokemon is these are brands. Now, Gundam didn't start as a brand, but these are now brands that are owned by large companies that have a financial incentive to have something on television advertising the other thing they sell.
Yeah.
And there's not some big unanswered question about the universe, especially if they can just keep making new ones in those spaces.
And I think that bears more resemblance to what Marvel has done with, they own this big brand, and they weren't always very good at it. They've published way too many comics in the past, but I would say you can probably go back as early as like the 1950s or so And I don't know how much you guys know about like the origins of manga publishing, but
I don't, but I'm excited to hear about it.
manga started out as obviously like children's comics for rent. You would go to like a library and you could rent the manga magazines the way you would rent a video. And then that got divisive. The certain manga artists wanted to keep it going like that. Some manga artists started switching that out for more cheaply published pulp magazines that would go on to become your weekly Shonen Jumps. And then there was a brief return to the lending renting model, but I think ultimately the weekly magazines kind of won out in the end, and then they started publishing them in collected graphic novels, which was kind of the compromise. That was completely different from what was happening in America at the same time, where we were developing the Comics Code Authority, which obliterated almost every comics publishing company in America except like your DCs and your Marvels, because they were publishing the least offensive, most easily tailored to the moral code of the Comics Code Authority, golden age of superhero type stuff. And so they developed those like big things because they were the only market in town, and everybody who wanted to work as an artist had to go work for them. Whereas Japan stayed like fiercely independent, and the authors of the mangas still have a lot of ownership over their material, I think.
That feels so backwards. When you describe it like so plainly like that, and I really think about it, like the Japanese, fiercely individualistic. The Americans, just completely about the group and not the individual. Which, like, I mean, capitalism, whatever, but like, that is an interesting way to look at it. Because I feel like, yeah, if you've got one person holding the mic, there's not really a lot of space input for somebody else to come in.
I think it really is capitalism, whatever. That there's the driving force behind that.
But it's interesting before that's like fully taken root. That's already. I mean, I guess it took root a long time ago.
Because it's easy to go like, oh, they want to share things with. It was like, no, they want the corporation to own it, so they can dictate things.
Well, and keep in mind too, in the 50s, you've got Japan recovering from World War II. They're occupied by the United States. There's a ton of political unrest. Manga, in a lot of ways, you could argue, became like their rock and roll. There was actually manga was a huge source of like leftist agenda politics.
Whoa.
There's something I want to talk about on this podcast eventually called Gekiga, which came out as like an alternative to manga. Manga means like whimsical images, and Gekiga means dramatic images. And so the Gekiga was like a rebellion against the cutesy Astro Boy type cartoons. And
that's neat.
Yeah, they wanted to tell more serious stories about like the working man getting screwed. And they did. And that led to a whole big thing. But keeping in mind, Japan is not like very religious. America was very religious. Now, both of them hated communism.
That's why we were buds in the Cold War.
Yeah. So they kind of bonded over that. But morally speaking, Japan didn't have a lot of our hang-ups. And so they were, like, in the 50s and 60s, Gekiga were publishing these hyper-violent, hyper-sexual things. But it still was, like, a cheap mode of entertainment at a time when resources were scarce. So they were just printing whatever you drew. Like if you showed up with a comic, it would get printed because they just needed to fill shelves. And for whatever reason, we had the post-World War II opposite reaction of the Red Scare, and like we've got to get our morals in order and shut everything down.
Yeah, we kind of battened it down after that.
Yeah, so you needed the approval of the Comics Code Authority, or no store would carry your stuff. You could still publish it, but nobody would sell it without that stamp. So we concentrated all our intellectual property into these big Marvel and DC corporations that were willing to play by the rules. And Japan had this more like, I guess, artist-friendly environment. And I think that carries through, but now I think you're starting to see, like with My Hero Academia Vigilantes, that Japan's realizing they're leaving money on the table. Whereas before, you didn't get a lot of spin-offs because Oda owns One Piece. You can't do a spin-off without his permission, and he doesn't have time to work on it because he's making One Piece. But I think now I'd be interested to know if Shonen Jump is maybe negotiating that into the contracts where they want the ability to do spin-offs. There's been a Demon Slayer spin-off. There's been the My Hero spin-off, the Naruto sequel, the Dragon Ball sequel. They don't want these big properties to die. And I think they are seeing what Marvel's doing, and they are trying to build their own brand around it.
So what do you think the tipping point is for something to go from, oh, this is just a series and maybe there's a spin-off or two, to a brand?
They would need to concentrate the intellectual property under one entity.
Oh?
Like if Shonen Jump, if you pitch your idea to Shonen Jump and Shonen Jump takes it and they own it. If I pitched a superhero to Marvel today, there would be a huge legal contract we'd have to draw up over who has what rights to it and whatnot, because I'm guessing Marvel would retain the exclusive rights to publish that superhero.
Mm-hmm.
And I might retain the right to get $1 every time they do that.
But so in this situation, I mean, you're going to, I mean, Marvel is sort of the brand, right? It's not,
Yeah.
It's not that Iron Man is the brand. Iron Man
is a brand now inside of
right.
this brand of brands.
So is
Right.
it Shonen Jump is the brand?
I mean, technically you could say
Yeah.
that because it's the one getting it has entire video games specifically about its cast of the people in the comics that it publishes.
Yeah, like
that's
you're
true.
not going to see Attack on Titan and Jump Fiesta. So they do have that a little bit, but I think they like if Shonen Jump cancels your series, I think
kinda dead.
I think you could just take it somewhere else. Like if Shonen Jump, like, there was a big deal with Trigun did this. Trigun was published, I forget in which magazine, but they wound up switching, and that's why the first 3 are Trigun, and then the next however many are Trigun Maximum or whatever. It's not a different series. He just had to like fudge the name.
Go somewhere else for it.
Yeah. So I think they would need to figure out what that is, because obviously the guy who writes My Hero agreed to allow somebody else to use his characters, because there are
Eraser's in there.
Yeah, I forget his
I'm
name.
bad at all the names. Eraser's in there. I believe her name's Midnight, the one teacher who's got like the smell stuff.
Is President Mike?
Yeah, he's there. Yeah, Eraser and President Mike are like buds. It's like them before they become. All of them become teachers, but like he's thinking about it.
Midnight,
Midnight,
I thought it was
Fat Gum.
Fat Gum's really cool in there. I like young Fat Gum. That bunny girl who fights everybody.
Mizuki.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like she pops up. Like there's a lot of people popping up and having like full arcs and moments. That's not like they're just cameoing. I mean, All Might's there, but he's kind of this big Superman, nuclear option button that they're literally kind of hovering their finger over the last one I was reading it. But, like there's enough there, but there is a main cast who is not any character and will probably never show up in My Hero Academia. Well, it can't. Isn't My Hero done? Or is it
Not
almost
yet.
done?
It's still, they're in the final battle.
Like, I don't know how Vigilantes ends that none of these characters go on to become anything of note in that universe. Maybe they do and they haven't shown up yet. I don't know. That's what kind of is interesting about it. It's the whole spin-off thing of like Marvel, of like, I watch this side series or I read this side series for the chance that something from that little thing pops up in the greater whole. And this is now reminding me, I was thinking this earlier, of like the anime movies, or like, is a video game a spin-off? Or like the Xenoverse games for Dragon Ball spin-offs. Because they're following you, the player, as a character in the universe, and you're dealing with a bunch of other characters that I actually don't know if they're anime canon or not. I genuinely don't know.
What I need everybody to do
Now
right
we're going
now,
off into the weeds.
I need you to pause this episode, go subscribe to Ramble Rousers, and listen to the canon episode that we did on Ramble Rousers.
I think that's why this is like I'm getting deja vu and old thoughts are coming.
Because I think that's pretty important, because I think if it's not in canon, then it's not a spinoff.
But if there's never any evidence, like if you if none of those characters from Vigilantes show up in My Hero Academia, does it exist? The canon only flows in one direction. The canon from My Hero flows into Vigilantes, but
there are things that occur in Vigilantes that are referenced in the main series.
Fatcom references the drugs.
Okay. Nope, that's true then. Okay,
Yeah.
yep. Then they are connected. But I guess it was you could write something almost like fanfic. You could write whatever you want that would lead into it's like here is unit of time where story happens. You could write whatever you wanted leading into that to set things up and whatever. The only thing that makes it the official a spin-off then, I put in air quotes that you can't hear because this is an audio format, is the publisher giving their blessing on it.
Right.
Or hopefully the author.
I think that it comes down to like the Xenoverse thing. Like if what's his name?
Toriyama?
So like if Toriyama comes in and says, "Oh, Xenoverse actually does take place. It's in this frame of time before Super,"
we would definitely get back into the canon conversation because
right.
then I go, I don't think he had much of anything to do with GT. Is GT a spin-off?
Yes. According to the
was.
fandom.
Is Super a spin-off?
It was.
Ben said his name is on it.
According to the fandom,
he's
it
not
is.
doing a lot with it. Again, we come back to this. I feel like this question is harder to answer with manga and anime because of this whole conversation we've had. There are a lot more creator-driven and controlled, where it's like instead of a corporation being able to grant this blessing, it's one person for the most part to genuinely grant the blessing to go, this is legitimate spin-off. Boop.
I guess then
maybe that's breaking down. I don't know. Like now I gotta bring back next time my research and how Vigilantes is happening and the context around it.
I think then what that conclusion is if we go with our conclusion from our talk about canon is whatever you think is in canon is in canon. So yeah, I guess they are spin-offs.
Well, the thing you don't have in anime and manga, well, in manga, you do have it in anime, that you don't have in comics is in comics, you can have the Brian Michael Bendis run of Spider-Man, where Brian Michael Bendis is writing every issue of Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have, or you didn't used to have that in manga, where you just swap out the staff on the manga. Like Marvel owns the X-Men, and they'll bring in so-and-so to write and so-and-so to draw.
Yeah.
And people may like those guys, but they're borrowing the characters. They're leasing them from
guard
Marvel.
changes.
Yeah. That doesn't happen as much in manga, or it didn't used to. You could argue that Dragon Ball Super is a case where that's happening because...
That one's, Dragon Ball's always kind of...
Super interesting about that is manhwa has a huge thing with that, where they'll... A lot of times the source material is a novel that they're adapting, and then... So you'll have the novel author, and then you might have an author that's adapting the novel to the manhwa, and then they'll have a separate artist. And a lot of times, and I've seen this a lot in a couple series that I'm currently reading very recently, they swap out artists, and people get pretty upset about that.
Well,
because
that's happened.
the styles change.
If you look at like Neil Gaiman's Sandman, it's Neil Gaiman's Sandman because that's his character, but you could argue, and it has been argued like with Jack Kirby, is to what extent does the guy who draws it contribute to the creation of that character?
Yeah, that's true. I definitely there was a run of Squirrel Girl that I really liked, and then at one point the art changed, and I just like, I can't read this. This is drivel. I hate this. And I think it was still the same writer, and it just didn't work anymore.
I haven't had an art change yet that I was like, oh, I can't continue with this because I get hooked on the story and everything. Although Ben and I talked about one on the bonus episode where the art went drastically downhill.
Yes, I remember hearing you guys talk about where, like, the first chapter something is like good, and then after that it's like, who's drawing this? This is drivel.
No, it goes from somebody who's drawing quite well to somebody who like struggles with perspective and proportion. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, and that one I continue reading because I like the story.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask a question that might take this in a different direction. Is it desirable to have more sequels and spinoffs?
Actually, I was thinking the same thing. I was wondering, like, does the existence of spinoffs or sequels detract from the original work? Does the fact that another person, like if we talk about how most manga are written and drawn by one person, does a spinoff that's written by another person, like, does that make the original worth less in some way? Is it?
I'll put it this way, and the reason I'm asking this is because of Marvel. How many... Let me ask you this way. How long do you think it will be before the inevitable reboot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as it becomes too convoluted and nonsensical?
I mean, they're technically already opening the door with that now with multiverse.
As has happened with every Marvel Comics universe.
Yeah, we are actively in the middle of that.
And how pissed are the fans of the cinematic universe who don't know the comics going to be when they realize that they just throw everything away every couple decades?
What are we at now? Like 15 years of the MCU?
Yeah, we're getting close. I don't know if it's 15, but I know it's like a decade ago is like when we're getting your like Iron Man 2 or something.
And now I know that movies operate on a different time scale than comics. So, you know, if you got 10 years of comics before they got a reboot, that could be 30 years of
Because there's a certain point where there's enough new people, like it's too inscrutable. There's too much of it to get on the ride. Like that's the problem. One Piece is one thing, and people have that problem with One Piece because there's too much of it to get on the ride. And movies and books and shows and stuff. So I would say to that in your original question, the quality and the quantity count. If there are too many, it doesn't matter how good they are. It will muddy everything. The Star Wars principle.
My personal feelings on this are, if there's a series that I really like, I like the core concept of, and I'm going to use Star Wars as an example here. When I was young, I was super into Star Wars. Like, I watched the original trilogy on VHS like 30 times when I was a kid. I read so many of the Expanded Universe books, and so for something that I really like, I want it to have lots of sequels and spin-offs because I want to keep consuming that universe. So I think there's worth to it in that anyone who's really into a series can then get more of what they are enjoying. Now, that doesn't mean that every single thing that comes out is going to be high quality. Some things are going to be, a hit and a miss.
Or it's going to be important to the main branch.
Right. But the quantity, when you're really, really into something, the quantity starts to matter more.
When I think to some extent it's inevitable that things will continue and spin off and whatever, because if you're writing a story that stands the test of time, it is going to eventually become legend. Like some of the most famous anime and manga, Dragon Ball included, are just retellings of A Journey to the West.
Yeah.
And so at some point, they're obviously going to have to, even if Toriyama didn't give his blessing, at some point 50 years from now, somebody's going to remake Dragon Ball. At some point.
That is a really interesting concept that I hadn't thought of, and seems really simple, but yeah.
Do you think at that time...
Now we're getting into remake territory and not spinoff.
Yeah.
Do you think at that time we'll look at it the same way that we look at, say, the original Superman runs, where we're like, oh, look how quaint. He was just like a really strong dude who could jump really far.
I think it depends on the quality. Yeah. This is a different topic entirely. I feel like we're on the precipice of its own episode that isn't manga and anime specific.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's important to the question as well.
Oh yeah, just saying there's a lot of ground here, and it feels like we've been talking for a while, and it just feels
I don't know that we've got quite far enough away from the origins of a lot of these things to really know how it's going to play out.
Oh, 100%. Like literally, Vigilantes. I mean, the thing I keep coming back to, My Hero Academia and Vigilantes is still running, and is like a kind of a maybe forebearer, maybe not. Maybe this is a one and done. Maybe they don't do this again in manga. Maybe they do it again. I don't know. Like I feel like that's where we are forecasting, we're prognosticating into the future.
Well, I guess what I'm saying,
the right use of that word.
I guess what I'm saying with the remake idea is more sequels make sense to me. Sequels I think are inevitable.
Yeah.
Spin-offs where you take one character or one idea from that universe and build a new story around it. I don't know. I feel like there's more room for that because manga artists obviously have their assistants who learn to draw very much like the original
and have the flavor of it.
Yeah, and they can take it over. I mean, I'm going back to sequels here, but that's what they're talking about doing with Berserk. His assistants are thinking about trying to finish it.
I hope they do.
I'd give it a shot. I don't know anything about his assistants, but I'd be willing to see what they do. That seems like a reasonable torchbearer to carry on. But I think that's what happened with Boruto. But yeah, the spin-offs, I don't know. I can really only think the Gundam ones are almost like what if sequels.
Yeah.
Because they're not really spin-offs. They're not really taking anything from the original and spinning it into a side story. Vigilantes is kind of the one main example. There's another thing that came out recently, but I don't think it has any legs. I don't think they're going to do anything with it, which is Demon Slayer, where they had the Fire and Water spin-off where they focus on Rengoku and the water guy.
Like that's something like it's
Forgot
like,
that's
there's a bunch of characters and places to explore in that universe that now that it's over we just didn't. So that like makes sense to me. I have a question that our definition of spin-off that in a series where kind of what it is kind of shaky. Are JoJo spin-offs of each other?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Technically, each one kind of takes the idea of the last one, but it's following somebody entirely new and a mostly new cast.
Thus spoke Kishibe Rohan. That's a spin-off.
That is 100% a spin-off. But is part 2 technically a spin-off of part 1? Is it a sequel or is it a spin-off?
I want to say from a technical standpoint, the ones that are following the Joestars, as in like the direct descendants.
Then is 7 a spin-off?
Yes, I would call it a spin-off.
Then 7's a spin-off.
Honestly, yeah. I think I would.
Technically, it's an entirely...
JoJo breaks it. JoJo's the exception that proves every rule.
JoJo is the uber exception. That's why it's like I like earlier in the conversation that thought hit my brain and I almost lost it. I'm like, no, this is too powerful. I need to speak this out. This truth needs to be spoken out into the world. Yeah, JoJo is always a definition breaker where it's just like, well, this, but it's like, well, no, it's like it's technically one running series, but it's not, and it's
JoJo challenges the requirements that a story be internally consistent.
JoJo challenges, JoJo is the outlier in all things. All
challenges any moment to moment to be consistent.
Literally anything.
Well, I think one thing that I definitely want to put out there, before we wrap up this discussion is thinking about the way that Star Wars has played out. I want to specifically speak to everybody who's a fan of any anime or manga. When spin-offs or sequels come out, you don't have to like it. And if you don't like it, it doesn't mean that it's bad or it's detrimental to the fandom or anything. I think we're seeing a lot of that with Star Wars recently. People have made their entire identities Star Wars.
Oh yeah, this is an entire conversation.
When something bad comes out, they get really upset about that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Enjoy what you like.
Do not make media your identity. It doesn't care about you. It's not alive. Also, corporations don't care about you. They're technically not alive.
Hey, we did a podcast about that on Rainbow Relishers too.
We did.
I had 2 things to maybe close it out.
Go for it, Ben.
Okay. So there's 2 topics I'm thinking about that kind of go off from this conversation. One of them is the history of anime and manga publication.
Mm-hmm.
And the other would be the inevitability of remakes and what that means and how many remakes have there already been, because remakes is slightly different than sequels.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a good.
So what I'm wondering is, because I know someone out there is listening to this and not responding because nobody responds. If you have a preference on which we would cover first, let me know.
Yeah, guys, listen.
We're
we
listening.
have
Literally one human. You could tell us whatever dumb stuff you want, and we'll dance.
You have so much power right now.
we have a whole big list of stuff that we want to talk about, but
And
we
you can
don't
shoot
know.
something right to the top of it. Literally,
we
just
don't know-
a couple words on Twitter or other ways to get us. We are desperate.
Yeah, we don't know when we're going to talk about each thing, and we're always adding more stuff to it. So if you reach out to us and you say, "Hey, here's a thing I'm interested in," we will probably talk about it on the next episode. So hit us up. Hey, Andrew, I heard that we got some stuff in our mailbag recently.
Yeah, it's weird because we don't have a mailbag. I guess little behind the curtain, which I'm also literally sitting behind to contain my vocal powers. We record this at my place, and we've never released the address, but we got a letter here specifically addressed to the three of us. So,
Was there a stamp on it, or was this just shoved under your door?
yeah, there's no stamp. I don't have a return address. It just sort of like appeared. You literally you can hear the paper
Okay.
that it was sent on.
So we've never heard from anyone, and all of a sudden, a letter shows up.
A
at our
very
door.
a weird letter. Like I've kind of read over a little bit. I don't think you two have. I don't think I've shown either of you two yet.
Well, I mean,
Now's the time.
I heard the paper. So why don't you
Okay.
let us know what's going on here?
Okay, so I'm gonna do my best with this one because I've read this and I want to make sure I capture the voice of this author because it feels very particular and I get a very like Brooklyn-y sense to it. So I'm gonna try my best.
I'm walking here.
I'm walking here. Forget about it. I'm trying to read the letter in this voice to get the proper vibe of it. Dear, that time I got reincarnated in the same world as an anime podcaster host, Brad, Ben, and Kermit.
That's us.
Seeing as you have a self-possessed Dr. Isekai Sensei Sama, and seem to really know your stuff about the Isekai process,
Oh no.
I thought I'd write to you with my own unique perspective on Isekai. You see, I play a very important role in the Isekai process. But I'm no otherworldly goddess, just a plain worker stiff. I'm the one driving that truck sand y'all keep talking about. Well, I'm not the only driver. There are many of us who take up the shadowy vigil on the other side of that windshield, sending a bunch of hopeless nerds to their power fantasy afterlives. It's not the most glamorous of work, seeing as we never get much personal credit in the process. It's just your average 9 to 5 to me, driving around and running people the universe is sanctioned to be sent to another world. I will say business has really picked up this past so many years. It's a wonder if there are any teenagers left in Japan. But they keep showing up on my route, and I keep mowing them down with an unflappable accuracy us drivers have become known for.
Oh my god.
It's a bit of a lonely life as an isekai driver. Not like you can have a ride along or talk to anybody about it, really. But seeing as you anime weebs are so in the know about it, I'm sure it can't hurt for me to send a letter every now and then. That being said, I do need to maintain my anonymity. This job may not pay the greatest, but the benefits are otherworldly. And the council that oversees us does not like our names or information getting out there. See, I've already said too much. I can't use my own name, but you gotta call me something. Hey, this'll be a laugh. Call me Truck Sand. That moniker has already taken enough glory from my work. It might as well take it over here on the podcast. Your favorite driver, Truck Sand.
Okay.
So that was a letter. Wow. That was,
Well, thank you, Truck San. It's great to hear from you. Like, right?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's frightening to hear from him.
Yeah. I mean,
He confessed to multiple murders.
to be fair,
That the universe had sanctioned, you know.
Well-
those we know for isekai that they've literally gone on to better places.
just to give you guys a little bit of an insight, I am already aware of, we'll call it the organization, for lack of a better name.
So I think that's why he sent it in. He knew.
Yeah,
knew
but-
you-
He knew you were in. I mean, you're the self-possessed Dr.
Yeah,
Isekai
it's,
Sensei Sama.
You know, now that I think about it, that's probably how they got the address.
Do you
Yeah, I
just
guess.
list this as your address?
He listens to the podcast
No,
and he got to talk to his handlers and got like kind of through back channels and got it.
The organization has a lot of reach. So we won't go too far into that because
You know, I don't want to out this guy. This guy's nice.
Personally-
he's sending us correspondence
yeah, I'm not ready.
via mail.
I'm not ready to be hit by a truck yet, so I want to sort of keep that on the down low.
So throw out everything we just talked about. I'm changing the topic of the episode. How threatened are the truck sands by automation?
Oh,
Is Elon Musk coming for him?
I think it needs to be too specific. I think it can't be. I guess I don't know. You could do a story about that. I guess.
Well, do you think that would be a spin-off series?
Oh,
a truck sand literally getting his job replaced.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, it's a spinoff of literally any isekai you want where they die by the truck, because then it could be how does that universe's truck sand deal with being out of a job because it is now automated?
We went over a lot of different sequels and spin-offs in our discussion segment there, but I have to say, Isekai has the exact same issues, and which makes sense because Isekai is just sort of a subset of the whole, as it were. But there are countless sequels and spin-offs to Isekai, and things that you wouldn't even think would need a spin-off or a sequel. One particular one that comes into mind, it's a series called The Reincarnated Magician of the Inferior Eyes. It's about
the magic man who can't see. Sorry, that voice is like really
gets
fun to do.
He gets reincarnated again, and he also can't hear.
so the premise of that is it's just a fantasy world, and actually, never mind, that's not an isekai. I'll tell you about it anyway. So it's a fantasy world. He's like the magician of the heroes party, and he's like super powerful.
So he's an actual mage.
Yeah, they stop the demon lord, everything's good, and then he's going on and they continue their lives, and then he's like, I want to seek greater magic, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reincarnate myself. And he doesn't strictly reincarnate. He actually goes to sleep for like 200 years or something like that, and reverse ages himself in that time.
Okay.
And
magic.
so he's quote unquote reincarnated 200 years in the future, and the series takes place in the future. But then they came out with the prequel, which is before he's even in the heroes party, and it's like going through how he met all the various people and everything. And as far as I can tell, this series isn't incredibly popular. It's it's popular enough for only a manga that's being released, but like the fact that they then went, this needs a prequel, and it's releasing alongside of it. Like the original one is not done yet.
Is
not
it two
even
different
close.
authors?
Yeah,
Which I would
say.
think it's got to be two different authors if they were releasing two different things at the same time, because that sounds like a Herculean effort.
Once again, I should have checked on that.
Man, that is really killing us this episode.
But there's so many others. One really popular one. You guys are familiar with Sword Art Online, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a spin-off series of that called Gun Gale Online.
I was going to ask about that, but knew so little about Sword Art Online that I didn't want to bring it up and then just go, I don't know anything.
The thing about that is the connection of those two is very thin. Now, they take place in the same universe. They're both like VR games that are happening, but it's literally just that. Gun Gale takes place after the original series, and it's just a VR game like the original one was, that people are using guns instead, and they go through like...
And they get stuck in it again?
No, they don't. That's the whole thing. Is like it's
just
just
people
people playing a game. That's the whole thing.
So that's what they took away. They didn't take any of the isekai parts. They just took the, what if you just played a video game with your friends?
Yeah, basically.
Oh, that's cool.
And the hook for it is that the main character is a really tall woman who's like embarrassed that she's tall and everything, and she tries to like stay hidden. And then so in the game she plays a very short little girl, but she also just kicks everybody's ass. So
How many hundreds of chapters did they get out of that?
I don't know. I watched the anime, so.
Oh my!
And I did enjoy it. Like, very low stakes, obviously, but it was decent.
What if they find out I'm tall?
How embarrassing! My height.
That
weird.
honestly, that was part of that. Yeah, meeting the people in real life was part of the
Oh
thing.
well, yeah, but just the
Yeah.
fact like I'm tall.
I'm tall. I don't know why you'd be worried
You're a
about
tall lady. Call me up.
Oh, I'm totally gonna spoil it right now, but the one other person that she meets who's like super good at the game ends up being a really famous idol,
Of course.
and so. Like in the game, she looks completely different and acts completely different because she's escaping from her idol life by playing this game. So it's a series about not being comfortable in your own body and then seeking out a different body, but then coming to terms with the fact that you live in the real world and they live happily ever after. So
Which has nothing to do with the original Sword Art Online.
right, just it takes
Interesting.
place in the same world.
Stamp the name on it. It's popular.
However, there's one very popular spinoff, and you guys have probably heard of this, and this is probably the weirdest spinoff. It's called Isekai Quartet.
Ah, yes.
Oh, is that the one with Tanya the
Yeah,
Evil?
Tanya's in there.
Yeah, so this is a chibi anime spinoff of multiple different isekai. So we have Tanya the Evil.
Tiny baby anime Hitler girl.
We have Overlord. So Ainz, the skeleton mage guy, right? You have Konosuba. And you have Shield Hero. Now, they've also now introduced ReZero characters.
Oh.
And I think there was another one recently. I don't actually watch this because I can't bring myself to actually watch
I was gonna say this.
But,
This sounds like the Super Smash Brothers of Isekai.
It's
my
it's
gosh,
really
could you
popular.
imagine?
People talk about it online constantly.
That's two fandoms I want to see in the same room.
And I think it sort of stems from the Konosuba sort of standpoint, although it takes place in modern Japan in like a school.
It's in funny haha wacko time
Yeah,
zone.
yeah.
It's just all funsies.
I'm the meme right now. I have no idea what Konosuba is, and at this point, I'm too afraid to ask.
What?
What?
I have no idea what
Ben,
it is.
I'm trying to see you from my bunker shield.
I've-
Hopefully, Brad will post a picture of on Twitter to get a. Okay, dude.
I have heard of it. I've heard that name many times. Is that a
Okay.
person?
Konosuba, it's the first syllable of a bunch of the Japanese names because it's like the actual full title is it's like something in God's land or something. The thing doesn't matter. It's the isekai that is not an isekai. I love it. It is the most accurate form I think of playing D&D, where everybody's just an idiot and they somehow get through, but they're all just sort of like dumb morons and keep messing up all the time, and it's really funny.
mean-
But then every so often they have like a really compelling moment.
I do have to point out, it is quintessentially an isekai.
Yes, but it doesn't feel like it because it's a bunch of them like just messing up,
It doesn't have
and they're
the
a bunch
trope.
they're a bunch of weirdos.
Yeah, it doesn't have
and
the
the show
trope.
knows that, and it messes with them all the time, and I love it.
It doesn't have the trope of he gets reincarnated or whatever and is super powerful. He literally gets tossed into this world with basically no power. He has the ability to get stronger, which didn't really exist in the old world, but he's out of his depth basically, which is okay because he's a moron and a lecher and like
And the
not
like,
a
that
great
is the thing, is
person.
that the universe treats him how I want all the universes that treat all of these dumb perverts that show up in all of these isekais, and that's why I love Konosuba, because all like him and the other girls in his little party are all just dumb weirdos. And the show treats them as such, and it's so funny.
It
and,
is,
like
yeah.
genuinely, it is really funny.
It's,
like I would say,
it's hilarious.
maybe we need to watch Konosuba then when we're like genuinely like because it was like that, and then Combatants Will Be Dispatched that you told me about a while ago, Brad,
Yeah.
is the ultimate of here's a show of a bunch of weird idiots that the show treats like that properly, and sometimes they get a win, and sometimes they just get like just punished for their stupidity.
I feel like this is the only thing I could ever do like a reaction video to. Like, you know, those people who are like, yeah, I've never seen Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. I've never seen Konosuba.
Yeah, no, genuinely. It's weird when you're getting like a tag team from Brad and I both going, no, dude, you really need to see this.
So, dear listener.
I love Konosuba. I forgot. It's been a while since I've thought about it.
Dear listener, please let us know if you would like us to do an actual video reaction of Ben watching Konosuba.
Or I guess I would say more or less a reaction to more like an episode by episode little diary maybe.
Sure.
You could throw a webcam on me while I'm watching it if you want. I can't promise I'll have big reactions, but yeah.
So another really popular one. I don't know if the spinoff of this was really popular, but I enjoyed it because it was a nice little relaxing kind of thing. So that time I got reincarnated as a slime, one of my favorite isekai ever. They had a spinoff anime, which I think is canon, but it's definitely sort of strange. It's called Slime Diaries, and it sort of takes place between season 1 and 2. I'm not sure exactly of the timeline, but it's basically like a slow life anime where it's just people going about their day, like they're building the town and they're farming and everything. So the main series has battles and magic and everything's going on, whereas this series is literally just like, oh, we're going to have a festival. Here's these Japanese festivals that I've brought to this other world, and everything's sort of chibi-fied, but not like fully chibi kind of thing. But that one's so much fun to me because when you're watching the main series, there's a lot of tension, a lot of heavy stuff is going on. There's humor there here and there, but like it's very much battles and drama and nation building and all that kind of stuff. And this series, Slime Diaries, is sort of just like, it's almost like those anime that are only like 3 to 5 minutes long that they do sometimes.
Mm-hmm. The shorts, yeah.
Yeah, except it's full episodes. But it has that feel of just like, here's a thing to just sort of calm down and like hang out, and it's interesting. So Isekai is doing the same thing that all the other series are doing, which is let's just put stuff out.
It is the most popular thing, so I feel like the corporation eye is looking the most at it.
Yeah. Now, what really struck me as strange when I stumbled upon this, you have all these different series that are doing spin-offs. And speaking of not isekai, like everybody's doing this. And I said to myself, is there any brand, series, stories that were not isekai and then did a spin-off that is isekai?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
That time I got reincarnated as Yamcha, which I don't know how legit that was.
Well, that one is definitely one that exists. I don't know how legit that is, though.
That one's
but
legitimacy is somewhat.
I did happen to find a very legitimate one, and I think Andrew's going to be very excited about.
Oh man, is this okay? I have a feeling I might know what this is. If it is, and I have an example of a spinoff now that I just remembered.
Okay, let's see if you can guess.
If it's something that is specific to me, is the really random JoJo Part 4 spinoff where Josuke goes off with Whole Horse that just started coming out like a month ago?
No, it's not, but that's a good one.
That is a really...
That's not an isekai.
I'm really sad I didn't remember that for our main conversation, because that is the ultimate, because that is not... that is not Araki, the writer of JoJo, writing that. It's just some other guy taking characters that were from stories told literally decades ago, teaming up for reasons unknown. That is mid-cool because JoJo's weird.
Yeah.
Because it's after Part 3, but before Part 4.
So this is very specific because this is a series, or rather a brand, I guess, that has had so many different runs. There's been movies, books, everything.
Does it start with the letter L?
Lupin the Third.
Yeah! Again, why am I... Where were all of these in my brain when we were actually talking about this topic?
Do you know it?
I don't know what you're going to talk about. Just Lupin is a really good thing of technically of having
so
spin-offs.
It's Lupin the Third, Neighbor World Princess.
Okay, lay it on me.
So I've read about 15 chapters of this so far, and I want to say there's like 23 available or so. They're easy enough to get through. I read most of them in about a day, I'd say.
It was more favorable than, juggling a stack of hammers onto my head,
I am actually enjoying it. It's not it didn't grab me like in the same way that some others have, but it's an enjoyable experience. So what's going on is Lupin and his gang are getting chased by Zenigata. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
They have just stolen some gold coins from, it's not a museum, but there's like some people, they have these old gold coins, right?
From Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get away, and they're looking at these and they're like, these coins aren't from any nation on earth. Like, what are these? And as they're trying to get away, they come across these doors in front of them, and they're like, quick, go through it. And they all go through a different door and end up in another world.
All of them in the same world, or all of them in different worlds?
They're all in the same world.
I mean, I feel like those characters are perfect for that, because they're practically, like, at this point, for how long Lupin the Third has existed, it's Scooby-Doo. Like, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Yes.
If Scooby-Doo has not isekai'd already, which they probably have.
Scooby-Doo meets Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could very easily just go, we're in a weird fantasy world that we weren't in before. We have to deal with freaking them going to, like, WWE Wrestler World and Flintstones World. And no, wait, that was another. The wrestlers went to Flintstones World.
Well, so they go to this world. It is straight up an isekai, medieval fantasy kind of world, right?
Yeah.
And Lupin steals the princess. Yeah. And there's all this stuff going on with the princess wants Lupin to steal her. She thinks he's the hero. There's this witch that's like taking over the kingdom. The witch gets to Zenigata and they call him the hero. And he's like, I got to catch Lupin. And so he's chasing after them. Jigen ends up with some dwarves and he's helping them out. And Goemon is with the elves and he's helping them out.
Right.
And then they start meeting up. And as of chapter 15, we still don't know where Fujiko is.
The redhead.
So, but her name was in one of the titles that I saw. So she's going to be showing up soon. But yeah, it's they don't get any crazy powers. But of course, like in the Lupin series, they sort of have powers. Like Goemon can do anything, and Jigen can shoot anything, and Lupin can also shoot anything for some reason, but Jigen's still there. But Lupin can he's also the wheelman, master of disguise, and like he can pickpocket anybody.
They're already super powerful. Like when you say it like that, it makes so much sense of like Dragon Ball Z. Like it's such an easy, and that like we said with Scooby-Doo, it's such an easy like here's a cast of characters that have been going on non-sequential adventures for many years. Just here is a new environment for them to have a fun adventure in. That is also kind of like, I'd say of the zeitgeist, I guess, but isekais are still big, so like of the popular thing.
Yeah, and so I gotta say, like, I've been enjoying it. So anybody who's into Lupin, Andrew, I think you should check it out. I think it's worth the couple minutes that it takes to peruse it, and you can read a couple chapters in 20 minutes.
I'll give it a look. That sounds fun.
And
Lupin's always been something a little bit more for me that like in motion with sound and all that. But like I've never read it, but I feel like this would be a good spot to start.
Now it's not written by Monkey Punch.
It doesn't need to.
Well, he's dead.
Yeah. So
he couldn't. He's literally ghostwriting it.
Yeah. It only started coming out. What?
Is it official, or is this just?
I'm pretty sure it's official.
Huh.
They're doing a really good job with the art style. It looks. There's sometimes when I'm looking at it, I'm like, that doesn't quite look right. But overall, it has the style. The story is relatively generic, but it's fun because
you want to see the characters get in those situations. See what they do. That's the whole reason you're there.
You're getting exactly what you want from Lupin. So
I'm still beating myself up for not remembering that JoJo spinoff. like Rohan's one thing, but this is very specifically not Araki and not both him and writing it and drawing it. So.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll do a prequel episode where we'll talk about.
I'll go back in time. and I'll push the car that saves Josuke. But actually, no, it's not Josuke. It's just a guy. He didn't go back in time.
Because Araki forgot.
Sure. I don't even know anymore.
Well, maybe next episode we can get Truck-kun to give us some information on his activities, and we'll see how relevant that is to what our topic is, which, once again,
You could control.
you tell us what you want to hear.
I'd also like to hear from any demon lords out there.
I think one works at McDonald's.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be one somewhere else, right?
Yeah, demon lord. How do you-
Anybody who's been isekai'd from a fantasy world to this world, I want to hear from them. Manga Book Club. Dum 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 dum. I was listening to old episodes and all of them sounded too just like I'm just making a jingle, so I wanted to do something just
Well,
left field comparatively.
today, to go along with that magnificent rendition,
Magnificent.
we're going to be talking about
better, right?
another very big and magnificent series called My Hero Academia.
It's an indie gem.
It feels weird to recommend bread.
Yeah, so this is
Bread.
I was thinking about this as I was, doing some research for this episode and everything. Very little research, as
Yeah,
we've
clearly,
mentioned.
as we keep finding.
But I picked this one specifically because of the tie-in with Vigilantes. We have a very specific offshoot of My Hero Academia that I wanted to talk about alongside this discussion of sequels and spin-offs. Now, we did already probably get to the bottom of the bucket on Vigilantes already.
Not too much.
But-
I don't think I've actually talked that much about the main character at all of the story.
Okay,
Which
yeah.
at first I was like, yeah, but I'm like, yeah, I haven't really talked about the actual character it's about.
But more specifically, I think I'm sure that most people listening to this have already either at least heard of My Hero Academia, but probably watched it. However, it is good enough that I want to make sure that everybody has seen it.
Yeah, and then maybe going to read it then. Do you want me to do my plot pitch on Vigilantes?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the main series,
Okay,
and then
we'll do
we'll
that.
talk about that.
I guess that'll set things up well. So I'll plant my seeds on that one as we talk about My Hero.
So, if you're not familiar with My Hero Academia, which I can't believe, please, if you're not, before you do anything else, comment, tell me why, how you've never heard of this. I
Never heard
wanna
of
know.
it.
If
that
you're-
you've
if you're
never
not,
watched it.
explain
you do not know
yourself.
the vague context of it.
Yeah. So the main premise of My Hero Academia is that the world in the future, there was some sort of apocalypse, and after that, people started to mutate and express what they call quirks. And those quirks, for the most part, are little mutations. People get extra limbs, or they'll start to look like some kind of animal. That's sort of completely random, but a subset of people, and not a small subset, a fair amount of people get a quirk that is basically a superpower. So, for instance, one of the characters that we first see can grow to giant size, and she's called Mountain Lady.
Mount Lady, not Mountain
Mount
Lady, just Mount Lady.
There's another
Once again,
one
coming back to tall women.
he grows like trees and stuff out of him, and he can sort of use those to like swing around and stuff. So there's an endless variety of these quirks, and a lot of people, their expression of their quirks is just small, like, oh, this guy's quirk is that he can control fire, except it's basically just a lighter. He's got a tiny little one. Oh, but here's another person that can control fire. He's actually the number 2 hero in the world, or Japan, because he can like really control fire. It's super hot, and he's like can control it really well. The main story follows a character that does not express a quirk. Most people express a quirk very early on in their lives. I think at like 2 years old, I think it is.
Fairly early.
Kindergarten, I'd say.
Yeah.
Our main character, Midoriya, learns that he has no quirk. And so he's going through life, and there's very few people now that don't have a quirk. I think they said it was something like 2% of the population.
It's a really small amount. And and it's not like, he secretly had one all along, unless something will have changed since I said this. Because I think it's literally, there's like some special bone people who don't have quirks have in their pinky toe. I don't think I made this up. I feel like somebody told me this.
There's it's like the pinky toe bone fuses, meaning they're more evolved because they're losing their pinky toe.
But as we get into the story, Midoriya is growing up. He feels out of place. He's not happy with, not having a quirk because he wanted to be a hero like his hero, who is called All Might. And All Might's the number one hero. And All Might is sort of like a Superman analog.
But he's cooler because he's All Might.
Yeah, he can't directly fly, but he's like super fast and super strong. He's like the strongest. And so number one hero, and Midoriya is like, what am I going to do? I can't go to the hero high school because I don't have a quirk and my life is so sad. But he still really loves heroes, and he like has these journals filled with all kinds of information about the heroes.
And he strives to be a hero.
Right. So one day, a villain attacks, because there's lots of villains in this world, because everybody's got some kind of weird power. And the villain ends up attacking one of Midoriya's, we'll call him a friend, although the friend doesn't think they're friends.
Frenemy?
Yeah.
Rival?
Bully?
Yeah, bully is probably the best word.
He softens.
And no one's doing anything about it. And so Midoriya jumps in to save him, even though he doesn't have any powers.
Putting himself at great danger.
In great danger. And then at the last moment, before both of them are going to die, All Might comes in and saves the day. And All Might sees what Midoriya is doing, and All Might goes, this is what a true hero is. He's trying to help someone even though, he doesn't have the power to. And so All Might says to Midoriya, hey, I want you to take over for me. Midoriya's like, what? What does that mean? It turns out that All Might's power is a quirk that is passed down through, and this is weird, the consumption of DNA of the previous holder.
I forgot about that.
We didn't have to. You don't have to add that if you're trying to sell people on it.
Yeah. He can pass his power along. There's like a bit where he's like, kid, eat my hair, and it's supposed to be like a weird, funny moment, but it's not important. Don't think about that too hard.
There is a moment where he's like, you just need to consume some of my DNA. And then everybody just like freezes for a moment, and he's like, my hair.
And it's still kind of weird, but yeah, that's not important.
Anyway.
No, they spend very little time on it, don't worry.
So, huge part of the series.
Brad's making it sound weird.
So
he can pass along his powers.
Yeah,
Done.
the story follows Midoriya as he goes to the most prestigious hero school in Japan and is training to be All Might's successor. The big problem being that All Might's power is too strong for his body. So he has to work really hard at both controlling the power and also getting stronger so he can use more of it.
And that's his hero's journey, literally.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty succinct. It's more succinct than my retelling of the entire first episode of Jujutsu Kaisen.
You're getting better at it, Brad, I will say. Yeah, kid doesn't have powers. Kid shows a heroic moment. Kid gets powers, still figuring them out. You get an entire cast of other teenagers who have various powers and them figuring them out and getting stronger and fighting the bad guys. And they've got their own rogues gallery and...
Very Japanese. There's a clear hierarchy. Yeah. There's obvious goalposts
to
move through.
So I would say that my main reason for recommending this to pretty much anybody, I mean, I guess it sort of comes down to people who are interested in superpower stories, but the way that Midoriya is portrayed as like very incredibly sincere, like the most sincere person
He's
to
a
ever
sweet
exist.
boy.
Definitely a sweet boy character. I think that portrayal of the hero's journey is really refreshing because he doesn't really struggle with his goal. Like, obviously, reaching the goal he has to work towards, but he doesn't really waver from it. He goes, this is what I'm going towards, and I'm going to keep going, at least so far.
I would actually go a little further. I'd say I'd recommend it to anybody who likes shonen stuff. I definitely recommend it to anybody who likes superhero stuff. But there is an as of yet unmade episode of Words About Books where I talk about how much I hate superhero shit.
I could see somebody getting it being oversaturated for people, but as a shonen like onboarding series, it's really good for that.
But I was
It's very approachable.
I was actually going to say, I think My Hero Academia is it kind of rejuvenated superheroes for me in that I don't know, there's something about Deku exploring what it means to be a hero, and there is all the great like Super Saiyan fighty moments, but there's also some of the best moments are when he's just getting his ass kicked and he's got to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of
And he gets beat up a lot.
Yes.
and there's a lot
Sometimes
in there.
he beats himself up.
There's a lot in
body
there
does.
about sacrifice and I think what I like about Deku is what I'm going to call like the heroic follow through. This is kind of what saves it for me. Because like part of my problem with Iron Man is like if you try to make superheroes like gritty and realistic, you wind up with the Watchmen, because the idea of a billionaire just coming at you with like his nuclear powered super suit and just unilaterally blowing people away, that's horrifying. But Deku has this heroic follow through where he will save you and then he will make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
Like he'll give you a call later to make sure you got home all right. He'll make sure the child he saves has somewhere to go. And
He's not just a fight machine.
yeah.
He's an actual hero.
Yeah, they basically adopted that girl, didn't they?
Yeah, he's
Oh yeah, you're right.
he's very interested in making sure that the people he saves are like okay in every sense of the word. He's not just there to fight, get the glory, and then go on to the next cool
Yeah.
fight.
And a lot of the other heroes don't do
Are
that.
still kind of figuring that out.
Well, and that's why All Might chooses him. And so the relationship between Deku and All Might, and talking about what a hero needs to be, and sort of the corruption that has crept into the hero system, that's the theme that I think is surprisingly serious and often ignored in a lot of the hype about My Hero. Because the fights are really cool. The animation's great. It is like just probably my favorite shonen of the current generation. But yeah, there's so much more to it. It has a very well-rounded world. It has a very like decent take on what it would be like if superheroes were real and like sanctioned, and
Oh.
there's
And what happens when someone who is slightly mentally not okay also has superpowers?
oh, and when like Mount Lady, she also has like product companies, and she does TV spots, and she's got to look pretty, and
The dragon lady, whatever her name is like a model.
If you like all of that, I've got a pitch for you then, Ben.
yep, I had a feeling we were leaning into this.
Okay, do we want to roll?
Go for it.
Okay, so vigilantes, and maybe it's just because I don't know. I have not read the My Hero Academia manga. I've only watched the anime, and I know sometimes themes can be a little stronger in manga writing when it's really one person's hands on the wheel. Vigilantes is a sometimes heavier, but I would not say like darker take on a lot of the ideas, and some of the ideas that are not processed in My Hero Academia. So vigilantes, I'm not going to have any names because A, I have not read it in a little while, and B, I'm terrible at names. But you are following a kid, I believe he's in high school getting ready to go to college, who has a very simple power that when he has 3 points of contact to the ground, let it be through his 2 feet and his hands or his 2 hands and a foot, he's able to slide around on the ground. He's called the Crawler because people say he's creepy crawly like a cockroach. He is not allowed to use his powers in public because he is not a sanctioned hero. He is a vigilante, so to speak. But he likes to dress up literally in an All Might hoodie and try to, in his small neighborhood, deal with the small level crimes that happen there. And it kind of expands out from there. There's a bunch of other characters, but it's something that is very about your community. There is another character whose name I think is just Pop, whose power is that she's able to like bounce through the sky, and she is literally like an underground like idol. Like she puts on impromptu shows at places and then the police run her off because she's not supposed to be there.
She doesn't have her performance permit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get more of like what it means to be a sanctioned hero. The like I never really felt, I think they talk about it a little bit, I never really felt watching My Hero about like what if you had a superpower and you legally were not allowed to use it as a civilian. Dealing with stuff like that. There's this whole rampant thing about drugs and people taking them that cause their quirks to go wild. Like it's one of the most American feeling manga that I have read while still being a manga. Manga in the same sentence. They deal with like a bunch of the people who get infected by the drug, like get shot with the drug by whatever the villain is, are like just like kind of larger scary monster people, and like literally them dealing with it's like we're not allowed to go into most public spaces because A, we don't fit because these places weren't built for people who were bigger, and we are too scary and everybody judges us instantly. And they open a cat cafe and it's really cute. But like it is genuinely dealing with that idea of just like these places aren't built, like society is not built to deal with us. We are the dregs that don't want to be dealt with. Just like all sorts of different things of like you know I talked about like I feel like the main cast is why you should really stick around. Like if you just want to get your little bits of that prequel bits where you're getting Eraser and Present Mike and Midnight and all that, like their stuff's really compelling. There's like there's an entire arc based around Eraser and like his journey to become a teacher that just feels like it meshes in really well. There's like an older, I don't even know if he has a quirk, but there's like a very old grizzled man.
The Punisher dude?
Yeah, he's like he's an old guy and he like literally punches people and like he is the main vigilante on the block, but like he's been around for ages and he can't really go anymore. There's a really cool arc, Ben, you were talking about earlier, and I think both of you were, of like, what does it mean that a hero has like is part of a brand, where there is one of the top heroes from America comes over to Japan to repair his image because he got into like I don't remember exactly. It is something with like either he's married or he's set to be. I think he's married, and he has like a moment of infidelity, and he has to come to like literally. They say it, he's coming to Japan to fix his image. And there's like a little arc with that where he's like very vain and all that, and it gets better. And like by the time he leaves, you're like, oh man, buddy, I'm gonna miss you, because like compared to everybody else that you have in the main party, like. He's the Superman. He can fly around. He's got all these powers. He's super fast. And you're dealing with, like, this girl can hop around. There's this old man who's just, like, he's really well planned out, but all he can really do is punch things really hard. Also, he's mad old. You know, this guy can, like, slide on surfaces. And admittedly, like, small spoiler, like, the main character's power set kind of grows in a really neat way that I don't think I've seen any other character really do in My Hero. But it always was just like, yeah, I'm on the ride for that one. But, like, and it makes that sense of power scale, because, like, in My Hero proper, like, almost the entire class has, like, big superhero powers, and not just, like, I have this weird thing, and I gotta do my best with it to literally just help my community. Because, like, literally drugs are infecting my community, and that escalates to terrorism.
You know, I think there's...
And I feel those themes a lot more, and they feel a lot more explored than just kind of like, oh, yeah, that's kind of a thing in this world, and then it feels like you kind of move on.
I've read about 20 chapters of Vigilantes, and I liked what I read. I got busy and it fell off my radar. But
I would put it back on your radar, and I'm probably going to catch back up on it after this episode. Cause
from what
really
I saw, it everything I like about My Hero is how it deals with. It keeps it light and funny because it is for kids, but it does deal with some of the realism of superheroing and what it means to be a hero, how it is more than just showing up, kicking ass, and going about your merry way. But Vigilantes started to, it saw a gap in that story, which was, yeah, you're literally telling people you can't use your own body.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a license. And that it explores that sort of angle of it in a way that just rounds it out very nicely.
It is heavier without being darker. It is not gritty necessarily, but it definitely feels like more than My Hero in the way it deals with its themes. But I think it deals with them really well. I feel like the way that it grows and escalates is done really well. Like it's got a very, as I'm talking about and thinking about it, even though it's been a while since I've read a good chunk of it, it's got a very, if you've read JoJo Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable with Josuke, where it feels like this is, like, that takes place in Morio. It takes place in a town, in a community, and you really get a sense of that in that. In Vigilantes, you really get a sense of that there. My Hero Academia, you don't really get a sense of, like, police.
Yeah.
You just, like, here is the class.
So...
But here it's like you feel these streets, these people, they get to know him, they get to know the other people and all the struggles and situations going on. So
there's one piece of My Hero that I think really grabs me a lot, and I'm wondering how much they do this in Vigilante, so you can, explain that then. The mechanics of the quirks.
Yep.
So I'm specifically gonna say, whoever's listening, if you haven't watched My Hero yet, go watch it at least until they get to the part where the second year heroes show up, the big three, because one of them, Mirio, his quirk is that he can sort of make himself intangible in that he can slip through, like he can walk through walls and stuff like that. However, they explain all the mechanics and everything, and it's so realistic because he can selectively make parts of his body intangible, and in order to walk through a wall, in order to walk through a wall and not fall into the earth, he has to make the part of him that's going through the wall intangible, but still keep his foot on the ground until he gets onto the other side, and then he can bring that one through. And they do this where, he can like drop into the ground, and as soon as he makes himself tangible again, he doesn't get stuck there. He shoots up to the surface. And so he uses that in such a way. But it's so interesting because like his growth as a hero is such that he needs to learn all these different things about how to control it, because he can't see when his eyes are intangible because the light can't hit his eyeballs.
He can't breathe because his lungs aren't there.
Right, so he has to hold his breath, and he has to like aim before he goes underground so that he can shoot up at the right spot and like know how fast he's going to be shooting up and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting.
There is definitely some of that nitty-gritty stuff in there, if that's what you're looking for, with certain situations and certain characters. Again, I don't want to talk too much about it, but the main character, the way his power grows, changes, comes into focus, I think kind of fits a little bit what you're talking about as well, but I think you will find what you were looking for in here. Okay. It's been a hot minute since I've read the like earlier parts, but
I think I can understand.
It does a good job of like basing it in something.
I think I can understand why you'd be attracted to that again, because like those kind of like downsides of a quirk that you have to work around really lend themselves to the puzzle battle kind of thing.
Well, My Hero manages to keep the thing I think a lot of people really like about anime that we've talked about before is the progressive fantasy.
Yeah.
It's not a puzzle battle. It's literally like you were talking about Midoriya Deku getting beat up. This guy gets beat up. Like a lot of, maybe I'm just thinking about like the major arc that I'm in the middle of now, of just like a lot of the times it is, and it's literally what he does normally when he's trying to help people, is I am here to help point people in the right direction and get them safe before the actual heroes show up. And that is my job. I'm literally here to get away, to guide people, to help them. The fight is not mine. And running into more and more situations where he has to get involved, even though he's way over his head. Like, I never get that sense as much somewhat with Deku, But again, it's that, like, you are mostly a civilian with a quirk that is not that useful, and you are in way over your head, and you need to do something because no one else is doing anything, and this is your community.
I just have a random story because this isn't very spoilery, but in the most recent couple chapters of My Hero Academia, somebody shoots cold fire.
Okay.
What?
Okay.
Is it blue?
Yeah, it's blue.
Good.
Now, I know a guy who, well, it's black and white, so it's white.
Yeah.
But I know a guy who said he hated it. He hated it because it was not realistic. Fire can't be cold. And it just made me think, because you were talking about like realism, and I was like, you know, it's not realistic. The quirks are magic. Just it's magic, but
Sometimes people have a line, I guess. I don't know.
they find a way to make it progressive. Like there is effort. Like effort is rewarded. You can get better. You can improve. It's not like American comics where so often, you know, Peter Parker's given his spider powers and they're as spider powery as they're ever going to be. And, you know, it doesn't matter how many weights he lifts. He's got that level of super strength. But, yeah, no, the blue fire was where he got off. But I was like, you know, when Todoroki makes giant wall of ice, like, where did all that water come from?
Yeah.
Like,
Air.
yeah. I feel like that would cause some kind of vacuum.
The moisture. I don't know.
I don't know.
I know. I don't. That's why I'm trying to do a silly voice when I say these things. So
I kind of lost it. I was like, oh, that you made it all the way to chapter like 360 whatever.
The
now you're getting off the train.
The Shadow Man who can create portals to anywhere isn't unrealistic.
Terrifying. And that was the thing. I think I don't remember if it just cuts with just they look like monsters, but like, or how much it was just me thinking about. Like, I think they do deal a little bit with like, what if you have a villainous quirk? Because we've definitely run into, maybe that was just something we were talking about, where it's literally just like, you have a power that's like that guy that can mind control people.
Yeah.
Like, you have a very villainous power. Like, being able to use that in a way that doesn't make people feel icky is kind of impossible.
I think that's a really good example, because that kid has a villainous power, and they very clearly show like he wants to change the connotations of it.
There's a giant freaking grasshopper man who's a part of those monster kids that are punks, and they're just like, I want to do good, and no one's going to let me because they're going to treat me like a villain, even though I'm trying to do my best to help.
That does become a thing in the main series, but they should probably do more with it. So I'm glad to hear.
It felt like, especially with like this drug angle. Like, this is the first time I've genuinely felt reading a manga the sense of like, I'm dealing with urban racism right now. Yeah. And I never, like, even if that topic, like, racism has been dealt with in manga and anime that I've seen, this is the first time, like, it felt like, oh, this is how I see it in America. These are the ways that it's described and the ways that it plays out. Like, it's in a way that I can't quite put my finger on. It's one of the most Western feeling manga that I've ever read.
For mainline My Hero Academia, there is a subplot where the bad guy tries to point out to I think they call them anthropomorphs, that they're getting a raw deal from superhero society, but it's kind of an afterthought for him, and therefore it's kind of an afterthought for them.
It is not. It is a major theme they take time and effort with here and check back up on. So yeah, no, read. Like, as with always these things, I'm now very excited to catch up on it, because I let it go for a couple months because it was like, we were in like a really long, multiple chapter running, like, big climax moment, and it's just like, just one more weekend and it'll be finally over. And then it was like months and months. It's like, I have to take a break. I can't keep stringing myself along. But like, it's so good.
Yeah. So recommendation from me.
Big recommend.
Yep. Gets the Ben recommend.
Yeah. Where can people find that?
Shonen Jump.
Yeah,
it's on Viz.
Yep.
It's on Viz.
Yep. And as we mentioned on a previous episode, you can
$2.50 a month.
Get Viz for very cheap. It's definitely worth it.
You can actually read the latest 5 chapters for free.
And the first 5 chapters. So if you're something you're not sure about, you can give that a shot and go, man, I want to keep reading this. And $2 for literally their entire catalog.
Yeah.
I wish they would sponsor us, because I shout about this service from the hilltops. It's the best. Their phone app's pretty great. I like that. Their website could use some work.
I would like it if
enough.
their desktop website would keep track of what you've read.
Me too.
That's my only gripe.
I'm going to go send them a correspondence about that.
Well, there you have it. One more episode in the bag.
Lucky number 7.
I hope everybody enjoyed that, and thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, comment, all the fun social media stuff. You can find us on our website, animepodcasterreincarnation.com. You can catch me on Twitter at Isekai Sensei. You can email me, isekaisenseisama@gmail.com. We also have our YouTube channel, That Time I Got Reincarnated as an Anime Podcaster. And check us out on Good Pods, which is a great place to rate the episode and comment. Ben, you want to plug anything?
Yeah, if you haven't had enough of me waxing philosophic about children's media, I also do a podcast called Words About Books. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find me on Twitter at Benbo Swaggins. Just going to plug the website one more time. Anime Podcaster Reincarnation.
Yes.
.com. Because I blog frequently on there.
Pizza.
I'm doing one a week. So check it out.
Awesome. And tune in to Words About Books in the month of June if you want to hear all about Thrawn.
Yeah.
Thrawn.
Mithron Naruto.
Bad voice to use, sound to make for throat.
Andrew, you got a plug?
You can find me here. You can also find me. I stream a game with my buddy Noah from Plus 2 Comedy at his Twitch on Thursdays, and then that will then end up on his YouTube channel, Plus 2 Comedy Gaming. We're playing Steven's Sausage Roll, and I'm making up lore about a puzzle game about rolling sausages around to cook them. So if you like my weird, absurdist humor, go find me over there.
And don't forget, we plugged 2 different Ramble Rousers episodes this episode, so make sure you go check those out.
Check those out, or maybe they'll make their way to this feed if we need another bonus episode.
Would you say that this podcast is a spinoff of Ramble Rousers?
Yeah, I would.
Oh my god.
It's more popular than Ramble Rousers with the numbers, so...
And we appreciate everyone who listens to us.
Yes.
So please, reach out to us on any of those platforms and let us know what you think. And you know what? If you do that, you can win a free PC game or even a physical manga.
We will mail it to you.
So once again, thanks for listening. And remember, if you get hit by a truck and reincarnate in another world,
Tip your driver. Tell Giguk you heard about Freerin here first.
yeah, really.
Stealing our bit.
We talked about Freerin months and months ago, and he just came out with an
You're not
episode
going to
just
actually
now.
put this in the podcast,
We
right?
own it now.
It's our thing. This man in Japan, or woman, this human in Japan wrote that we had nothing to do with. It's ours.
I started reading Freerin 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure I own it.
I mean, we all collectively own Spy Family because we
That's
all read
true.
the manga well before the anime came out and told everybody how good it was, and now everybody knows how good it is.
You're welcome.
Cut all of that. Do not put any of that in there.
I
Not
most
right.
certainly will not. Everybody's going to be like, what the hell are they talking about?
Who's Giguk?
Yeah, exactly. Who is Giguk?
Oh, it just keeps going.